As we begin our long, slow journey down Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, looking out through the glass, we are traveling along one of the most historically dense, physically imposing, and deeply fascinating corridors in the entire American Midwest. Settle into your seat and get completely comfortable because we are going to take our time. We are going to trace the absolute heartline of the Mahoning Valley, pulling apart the layers of history hidden right here in plain sight. We are starting our drive on the northwest side of Youngstown, keeping the massive twisting trench of the Mahoning River just off to our right. We are going to push our way straight through the heavy concrete of the downtown grid, climb slowly up into the historic ethnic neighborhoods of the east side, and eventually roll out into the quiet, rural borderlands of Coatesville and Lowellville. The road you are looking at right now is so much more than just a modern commuter route. It is a living, breathing, heavily scarred timeline of the American industrial empire. Look out at the landscape surrounding the pavement. The sheer scale of the valley we're driving through is staggering. Thousands of years ago, the ground we're rolling over was violently carved out by the retreating glaciers of the last ice age. Those massive walls of ice, perhaps a mile thick, ground the earth down into a deep, sweeping basin, leaving behind the Mahoning River to snake its way through the bottom. For centuries, this valley was a quiet, pristine, densely forested hunting ground for indigenous tribes. The canopy of oak and maple trees was so thick that the forest floor lived in permanent twilight. But everything changed in the early 1800s because of what was buried directly beneath the soil you're looking at right now. We are cruising through an area historically known as Briar Hill. In the 1840s, a local farmer and businessman named David Todd, who would eventually become the wartime governor of Ohio during the Civil War, discovered that the hillsides right here were packed with an incredibly rare, incredibly valuable type of coal known as block coal. It burned incredibly hot and incredibly clean with almost no ash. At the exact same time, they discovered massive deposits of black band iron ore buried in the exact same hills. That specific, miraculous combination of geography and geology was the absolute spark that ignited the entire Mahoning Valley. Todd and his partners built the very first primitive blast furnaces right here in Briar Hill, using that block coal to melt the iron. If you were looking out this windshield in 1850, you would have seen a valley rapidly transforming from a quiet, dark forest into a loud, smoky, chaotic industrial frontier, completely consumed by the pursuit of iron. As the road carries us southeast, following the ancient winding curve of the river, try to imagine the sheer apocalyptic scale of the steel industry that eventually devoured this specific stretch of land over the next century. By the early 20th century, the primitive stone iron furnaces had been replaced by colossal, sprawling, terrifyingly massive steel mills. The banks of the river to your right were completely dominated by the massive, heavy footprints of the Youngstown Sheet and Tube Company, Republic Steel, and United States Steel. For nearly 10 solid miles, the riverbank was a continuous, unbroken, deafening wall of towering smokestacks, massive blast furnaces, and heavily mechanized rolling mills. If you were driving down this exact road in 1943 at the absolute height of the Second World War, the sky above your vehicle would not be blue. It would be a thick, suffocating canopy of heavy black smoke, brilliant orange fire, and swirling gray ash that blotted out the sun. The streetlights would sometimes have to stay on in the middle of the afternoon just so people could see the pavement. The noise would be physically vibrating through the floorboards of your car. You would hear the constant, deafening roar of the furnaces burning at 3,000 degrees, the massive, rhythmic pounding of the drop forges violently shaking the earth, and the heavy, metallic screaming of the freight trains moving tons of slag. Over 50,000 men and women worked in the mills right here in Youngstown, operating in blistering, terrifying heat. They worked around the clock, covered in sweat and graphite dust to produce the millions of tons of steel that literally built the skyscrapers of New York, the massive suspension bridges of the West Coast, and the heavy armor of the Allied tanks that fought across Europe. The unbelievable, staggering wealth generated by the fire to our right built the massive, heavy infrastructure of the city we are about to enter. We are approaching the edge of downtown Youngstown. The road shifts, carrying us toward West Front Street. Look at the massive, heavy stone retaining walls and the deep industrial architecture that still clings to the edges of the river. The river itself was treated as nothing more than a massive moving tool for the steel companies. It was used to cool the blistering hot steel, and it was used as an industrial sewer. For decades, the water in the Mahoning River literally ran hot to the touch, entirely dyed unnatural shades of rust and chemical orange by the runoff and heavy metals. It was totally devoid of biological life. But today, as you look out toward the water, you can see the profound, quiet healing that is taking place. With the mills gone, nature has slowly, stubbornly reclaimed its territory. The water runs cool, the fish have returned, and you can see blue herons hunting in the shallows where massive industrial barges used to load their freight. As we merge onto West Front Street and glide toward the massive intersection at Market Street, we are entering the historic commercial epicenter of the city. Look at the towering brick, limestone, and terracotta architecture rising up around us. In the 1920s, Youngstown was one of the wealthiest, most vital, and fastest-growing cities in the entire country. The downtown grid you are looking at was an absolute beehive of activity. The sidewalks were packed shoulder to shoulder with men in heavy wool suits and fedoras, and women in elegant dresses, all spending the massive wages generated by the steel mills. Look out at these historic building facades. This was a city of incredible cultural milestones. Just blocks from here, 4 young immigrant brothers named Harry, Albert, Sam, and Jack opened their very first movie theater, a small room with a borrowed projector. They would eventually take the money they made right here in Youngstown and move to California to establish Warner Brothers Studios, forever changing the global entertainment industry. There were massive, opulent movie palaces right on these streets, towering bank buildings with intricate marble lobbies, and massive multi-story department stores like Strauss Hirschberg that rivaled anything found in Chicago or New York. We are crossing through the Market Street intersection now. Just to your right sits the historic Market Street Bridge, a massive, heavy steel span that connects the north and south sides of the city across the deep river gorge. It is a vital, historic piece of engineering that has carried millions of exhausted steelworkers back and forth to their shifts over the last century. But as we push through the downtown grid, transitioning onto Oak Street, we have to acknowledge the darker, much more dangerous shadow that hung over this city for decades. In the 1950s and 60s, the immense wealth of the steel industry attracted massive networks of organized crime. Youngstown sat perfectly, tragically positioned exactly halfway between the powerful mafia syndicates of Cleveland and Pittsburgh. Both families wanted total control of the lucrative illegal gambling rings and vending machine operations in the Mahoning Valley. The result was a brutal, decades-long turf war that earned Youngstown the national infamous nickname of Crimetown, USA. Over the course of a single decade, there were more than 80 unsolved car bombings in this city as rival mobsters settled their scores with dynamite. The people living in the neighborhoods we are about to drive through lived in a constant, low-level state of anxiety, knowing that the violence could erupt at any moment right on their streets. This is where the geography of our drive begins to shift dramatically. We are leaving the flat, heavy commercial and industrial basin of the river and beginning a long, steady, deliberate climb upward. We are heading up Oak Street straight into the east side of Youngstown. As we climb, look at the neighborhoods rising up on the hillsides. The story of Youngstown is completely inseparable from the massive wave of global immigration that occurred at the turn of the 20th century. When the steel executives realized they needed tens of thousands of strong, desperate men to work the grueling, highly dangerous, back-breaking jobs in the blast furnaces, they heavily recruited immigrants from Eastern and Southern Europe. Young men from Italy, Slovakia, Poland, Hungary, Ireland, and Greece packed their entire lives into small, battered suitcases, crossed the Atlantic Ocean in steerage, took the train to Ohio, and walked right up this exact hill. The east side of Youngstown became a massive, densely packed, vibrant mosaic of distinct, fiercely proud ethnic neighborhoods. As you look at the older, weathered homes passing by your window, you are looking at houses built by men who spent 12 hours a day breathing in toxic smoke and dodging molten steel just to provide a better life for their families. They built strong, deeply rooted communities right here along Oak Street. If you were driving up this road in the 1950s, you would hear a dozen different languages being spoken on the sidewalks. You would smell the heavy, rich aromas of authentic Italian tomato sauce simmering for hours, spicy polished kielbasa, and Hungarian paprikash drifting right out of the open kitchen windows. These immigrants built massive, beautiful brick and stone churches that still tower over the rooflines today, anchoring the community through faith, tradition, and shared hardship. The men who lived in these houses did not have long commutes. Every single morning, long before the sun came up, thousands of men would walk out of their front doors, walk right down Oak Street, and descend into the massive, fiery trench of the river valley to clock into the mills. The rhythm of the entire East Side, the times they ate, the times they slept, was completely dictated by the shrill, echoing blast of the factory whistles signaling the shift changes. But as we continue to push eastward on Oak Street, looking at the empty, overgrown lots and the quiet stretches between the houses, you have to confront the absolute devastating heartbreak that this specific route experienced. On Monday, September 19, 1977, a day permanently and tragically known in this valley as Black Monday, the Youngstown Sheet and Tube Company suddenly, without warning, announced it was shutting down the massive Campbell Works just down the hill. Almost overnight, 5,000 jobs were completely wiped out. Men who had given their entire adult lives to the mill, whose fathers and grandfathers had worked the exact same blast furnaces, were handed pink slips and locked out. And that was just the beginning of the nightmare. For the next 5 years, the other massive steel companies completely collapsed, shuttering their mills and abandoning the valley in a massive wave of corporate bankruptcies. Over 50,000 people lost their jobs. The economic, psychological, and social devastation to the neighborhoods along Oak Street was absolute and crushing. The massive, roaring heartbeat of the city went terrifyingly silent. The corner grocery stores, the local taverns where men cashed their paychecks, and the family-owned bakeries slowly starved to death and closed their doors. Families were forced to pack up their cars and leave the valley in a massive, heartbreaking exodus to find work in the Sunbelt of Texas and Florida. When you look at the overgrown lots and the quiet, abandoned structures that still pepper the East Side today, you are looking at the literal, physical scars of one of the most violent, catastrophic, and rapid economic collapses in American history. The depression here was so deep that even the beloved, iconic Idora Park, the massive wooden amusement park that had entertained the families of mill workers for generations, eventually fell into ruin and burned to the ground. But as we keep rolling, transitioning smoothly onto Oak Street Extension, I want you to look closely at the homes that are still standing. Look at the beautifully manicured lawns, the fresh coats of paint on the trim, and the quiet, enduring strength of the neighborhoods. The people of Youngstown possess an absolute ironclad, terrifying grit. They did not all leave. The families who stayed dug their heels deep into the earth. They endured the total collapse of their economy. They survived the mob wars, and they slowly, stubbornly fought to stabilize their city. The people living along this road today are the proud, fiercely resilient descendants of the men who built the modern world. They refused to let their home be wiped off the map. We are pushing further east now, and the landscape is undergoing a massive, beautiful, and highly noticeable transformation. The dense, tightly packed urban grid of the East Side is slowly unspooling. The houses are spacing out significantly. The setbacks from the road are getting much deeper, and the heavy concrete sidewalks are disappearing completely. The air out here even feels different, carrying less of the heavy city heat. We are crossing the invisible boundary line into Coatesville Township. Look out at the wide, sweeping Ohio sky and the massive, ancient maple and sycamore trees beginning to reclaim the edges of the road. We are trading the heavy brick and asphalt of the industrial city for the quiet, rolling green hills of the agricultural frontier. Coatesville was surveyed and settled in the very late 1790s, long before the first piece of coal was ever pulled from the earth in Youngstown. It was a completely separate world, dominated by massive, sprawling dairy farms, massive red wooden barns, and endless, highly productive fields of corn and wheat. Even during the absolute height of the steel boom, when the sky over Youngstown was choked with black smoke and fire just a few miles away, Coatesville remained a quiet, pastoral sanctuary. As we cruise down Oak Street Extension, enjoying the smooth, rhythmic hum of the tires against the pavement, notice the architectural shift. You are seeing beautiful, sprawling, single-story mid-century ranch homes and historic 19th-century farmhouses sitting on massive, quiet plots of land. For decades, this road served as a vital transition zone. When the mill workers finally saved up enough money from their grueling shifts, they would often move their families out of the dense, smoky city and build a home right here in Coatesville, seeking fresh air, open space, a massive backyard garden, and a piece of the quiet American dream. We are approaching a very historic, incredibly important intersection. The road begins to widen as we prepare to merge onto United States Route 422 East, also known locally as McCartney Road. As we make the sweeping, steady transition onto the massive, wide lanes of this highway heading toward our final destination in Lowellville, you are driving onto one of the most vital historic transportation corridors in the entire state of Ohio. Look at the sheer width of the road and the heavy commercial infrastructure that dots the edges. Long before the massive, multi-lane federal interstates like I-80 and I-76 were blasted through the mountains and forests in the 1960s, Route 422 was the absolute king of the road. This highway was a massive, roaring artery that directly connected the heavy industrial weight of Cleveland, straight down through the steel empire of Youngstown, and all the way across the state border into the massive coal and steel hubs of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. If you were driving on this exact stretch of McCartney Road in the 1950s, it would have been an absolute chaotic symphony of motion and commerce. The road was packed, bumper to bumper, with massive, heavy-duty freight trucks hauling thousands of tons of stamped steel, heavy machinery, and raw materials between the industrial giants of the Midwest. The shoulders of this highway were completely lined with classic, neon-soaked American infrastructure. You would have seen dozens of brightly lit motels with their glowing vacancy signs buzzing in the night, classic chrome-plated diners serving hot coffee and cherry pie to exhausted truck drivers at 3 in the morning, massive, bustling gas stations with attendants in crisp uniforms, and motor courts designed for the endless stream of cross-country travelers. This specific highway corridor was a massive economic engine all on its own. It represents a deeply romantic, highly transitional era of American travel, when the country first truly fell in love with the freedom of the automobile. But when the massive high-speed interstates were finally completed, bypassing these older, winding routes to save commuters a few minutes of time, the heavy interstate traffic completely vanished almost overnight. The motels closed down, the massive neon signs burned out and rusted, and Route 422 transformed from a roaring national artery into the quiet, highly functional regional commuter road you see out the window today. As we cruise steadily along McCartney Road, we are entering the absolute eastern edge of the state, approaching the historic village of Lowellville. Look out toward the horizon. You can feel the deep, heavy topography of the Mahoning River Valley pulling us back in. Lowellville sits right down in the deep, steep-sided trench of the river, pressed right up against the border of Pennsylvania. Just like Youngstown, Lowellville was completely defined by the massive, heavy industries that set up shop on the riverbanks. It was famously home to the massive Sharon Steel Works. The sky here was once just as fiery, loud, and choked with smoke as the city we left behind. It was a town of incredibly hard-working Italian immigrants who brought a fierce dedication to their community. Even today, the culture here is incredibly deep. Every summer, this village completely shuts down for the Mount Carmel Festival, a massive week-long celebration of their Italian heritage, featuring incredible food, brass bands marching through the streets, and the famous explosive tradition of the baby doll dance, where a massive papier-mâché doll rigged with fireworks is lit up in the center of town. But as you look at the quiet, heavily forested hillsides rising up around the highway today, you're seeing a region that has completely come full circle. The heavy, violent, deafening era of the steel empire has completely vanished from the surface of the earth. The massive blast furnaces have been torn down, remediated, and sold for scrap. The thick black smoke has cleared, revealing the wide, beautiful, completely unobstructed Ohio sky. But the history of what happened here, the blood, the sweat, and the unimaginable heartbreak is permanently etched into the pavement beneath our tires. And it is deeply embedded in the quiet, stubborn resilience of the towns we just drove through. We are approaching our final destination at 4740 McCartney Road. As the road slows and the journey finally comes to its end, take a long, deliberate look out the window at the quiet, peaceful landscape. Over the last 23 minutes, you have traveled through a massive, sweeping, deeply emotional epic of American history. You have looked out over the ancient, violent path of the glaciers. You have envisioned the terrifying, beautiful fire of the blast furnaces that built the modern world. You have traced the desperate, hopeful footsteps of global immigrants, felt the devastating, crushing weight of industrial collapse, and witnessed the quiet, enduring strength of the communities that absolutely refuse to break. You have traveled the historic, neon-lit corridors of the early highway system, and you have arrived at the quiet, peaceful borders of the state. Thank you for taking your time, looking out the glass and traveling the deep, heavy, and profoundly enduring roads of the Mahoning Valley.